Hi, and welcome to the second part of the short lectures on family communication. So when we left off, we were talking about family communication being role based, and I want to start here by talking about how it's involuntary. So one thing that we're all acutely aware of, I think, is that we can't choose our family. We can't choose our parents, our brothers and sisters, or our other relatives. And of course, as we get older, if we get married, our involuntary family connections grow more complex. We're related by marriage to more and more people. Indeed, they find that an average adult couple is connected to at least three families, right? So the husband's family, the wife's family, and their family together, right? And even if you cut ties with your family, their influence persists. That influence that they exerted over you during your childhood remains, right? It never really goes away. So, one way that we can think of families is as systems, right? A group of interdependent individuals that interact and adapt together as a whole. And within this system, the behavior of one family member usually influences everyone else. So, for example, if mom's having a bad day, everybody's probably having a bad day, right? Um, and we know that communication shapes the welfare of families, right? Communication is one of the keys to having a happy, satisfying interpersonal relationship with all of the family members, right? Now, within every family system, we have subsystems that operate. So the family system might be mother, father, brother, sister. And the brother sister relationship would be a subsystem of that larger family relationship. At the same time, families are also members of larger suprasystems. Excuse me. So suprasystems would be your extended family. So the mother, father, brother, sister are part of a much larger family where there are grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, and so on, right? Now, families also, of course, are interdependent parts of society. So, families operate within a society, but what happens within that family also affects society more broadly. So, for example, children from violent homes tend to have weaker social skills in adulthood and are more likely to commit acts of aggression, right? So the way your family treats you when you're little, if they treat you badly and they're violent to each other, for example, then chances are you're going to grow up and be violent too, and that has effects that sort of reverberate throughout society. So in this sense, families really are more than the sum of their parts. It's more than just mother, father, brother, sister. It's the family is both its own unit and a unit in a larger system. Now, families communicate in a couple ways, right? When we talk about family communication, we talk about modes of conversation and levels of conformity, right? So, when we're talking about modes of conversation, one of the things that we take into account is what's called conversation orientation. And this is how open families are to discussing a range of topics. If you have a high conversation orientation, then you can probably talk about anything. Some people have families like this. You can talk about things openly, whenever you want, spontaneously. Families with low conversation orientation have a lot of topics that are just off limits, things that they won't talk about with each other. Now, one thing I should note is that even in families with very high conversation orientations, there are limits with what people talk about. No one talks about everything with their parents or with their children, right? There's some things that people just keep to themselves no matter what. Now, with conformity orientation, this is about how strongly a family enforces the uniformity of attitudes, values, and beliefs. So, how strict a family is, let's say. So, high conformity families manage communication to achieve harmony. They reinforce hierarchical structures where patterns of behavior in terms of communication often fall into the avoid and oblige category. So what this means, right, is that usually in the hierarchical structure, the father is in charge, mom's number two. They rule over the kids. What they say always goes. And with avoid and oblige, that means there are a lot of things you just don't talk about. So you're not going to talk about drugs. You're not going to talk about sex. You're going to hide a lot of things from your parents, right? Now, low conformity families are characterized by individuality, independence, and equality, right? So the flip side of all this is the low conformity family. So the low conformity family is all about everyone's got a say, it's important, it's valued. The kids can sort of do what they want, right? They have a certain degree of independence. They're not ruled over by their parents all the time. And so together, conversation and conformity orientation can work out in four ways, right? They can combine in four ways, with each mode representing a different communication pattern, and here they are, right? So if you come from a place where you have a high conformity orientation and a high conversation orientation, then what you're going for in your family usually is what we would call a consensual relationship, where you strive for a combination of conformity and openness. Now, if there's high conformity orientation, but the conversation orientation is low, then usually this stresses a relationship of obedience and conformity. Do what I say because I told you to say it. Now, if the conformity orientation is low and conversation orientation is high, we exchange ideas, but the parents aren't the final authority, right? And then finally, if the conversation orientation is low and conformity orientation is low, there aren't any real consistent norms, there's not much parent-child communication at all, and it results in sort of a laissez-faire kind of atmosphere. And laissez-faire is French. It literally means hands-off, right? This, generally speaking, by the way, this is the worst for kids in terms of them coming out to be effectively functioning individuals. So we already talked a little bit about each of these, right? So I'm going to run through these slides pretty quickly. You can look through them in your own time if my explanations didn't do enough for you. So as I suggested before, some communication patterns are better than others. So children who come from consensual and pluralistic families are often more confident listeners. They're more intellectually flexible. Children from pluralistic families are less verbally aggressive. And a protective approach by parents results in increased secrecy and lower satisfaction for all family members, right? So parents who try and rule with an iron fist usually end up making themselves unhappy and their children unhappy as well. So the bottom line in all this, of course, is that open communication and shared decision-making produces better results than power plays and refusal to engage in open dialogue. Now, interestingly, with social media, we know that it's helped. Texting, for example, has resulted in an increased sense of connection. It has a positive impact usually on family relationships. People express their feelings more honestly via text than in person. Email works kind of the same way, although parents like it better than children. Children who share social networks with their parents report stronger relational bonds. They feel closer to their parents. And children who deny parents access tend to have higher levels of aggression and delinquency. All right, so that does it for this short lecture. Thanks for checking it out. Next time we'll talk about communication in friendships.